What's up, guys? Today we have a new video. Today I'm going to be talking about using vintage glass. Not really that specific to this lens in particular, but this was the lens that I used. This is the Minolta 28-85. I originally got this idea by a fellow YouTuber who I'll link in the description, Thomas K. I don't know how to pronounce his last name. He started using Contax Zeiss glass on his FX3, so of course I can't afford Contax Zeiss glass quite yet, but I wanted to kind of talk about the benefits of using vintage glass on just a modern camera body. So that's kind of what I'm going to talk about today. So to kind of like describe the setup that I have an MDE to E Key and F concept adapter, which was just really cheap on Amazon. So I just bought that, and then I adapted this still lens that I'd originally had on my Minolta film camera to a E-mount platform. So that was super cool. Like I said, it's 28-85, so it is a zoom lens. So notoriously, they're not as sharp as, you know, regular prime lenses. But I'm gonna kind of talk about in a little bit more detail, like the use cases. So why would someone use or choose to use vintage glass on a modern camera body? And the way I kind of look at it is kind of from like a bigger perspective. Right now in all of filmmaking and all of photography, we're able to achieve super great results by using, you know, a average affordable camera. And a lot of the times our images and videos kind of turn out to look similar. In the age of always using the same LUTs and creating stupid orange and teal look, it's really hard to differentiate yourself from other people and other filmmakers. So this was something that I wanted to try out, and I'll kind of get into why I really enjoy it. So let's quickly talk about some of the benefits to this in kind of that perspective of differentiating yourself from other filmmakers. So right off the bat, I can tell you that vintage glass, no matter what type of glass it is, it's never really going to be as sharp as modern glass. And I really consider this to be a positive in my eyes. I think that we have so much great technology that really allows you to get some really like phenomenal sharp images, but sometimes when you're shooting a project, you don't want that. Like you kind of want it to look more edgy and more, not literally edgy, but you kind of want the look to it to seem kind of vintage. And that's a pretty popular thing nowadays, and I'm just as much of a victim of that as the next guy. But that's kind of the look I always go for my color grades, and especially like some of my video work. I always try to add a little bit of a vintage effect to it. So I think that this is a great way to kind of achieve that. And I think that the really cool thing about using vintage glass is that it just creates this entirely different look that, you know, from a regular set of eyes, not talking about a filmmaker's perspective, but you can definitely kind of tell a difference between modern glass and not modern glass. I think the biggest factor when it comes to this is just softening the image up. Nowadays, like, everyone uses a diffusion filter, and the Black Promise, that was a super big thing, you know, 2 years ago. And even today, everyone's trying to look or take the edge off of their image. But I think that using vintage glass is really the most effective, and it's honestly the cheapest way to get there. So yeah, that was at least my experience. And to kind of like give you a little bit more of a summary of how I use this lens, I just took this out on a test shoot. Me and my friends just went down to the beach, and we just hung out for a couple hours. So I figured, why not give this a shot? And honestly, I really do like the results of how the videos and stills came out. So I took both photo and video from this day, and then there was one other day that I gave this a shot. It was just like a walk through my neighborhood with my girlfriend. And yeah, honestly, I was really impressed with how much character was in this lens. And this isn't just for this one Minolta lens. I think it's for pretty much every other vintage lens. Of course, you're going to get different effects for different lenses, but I think that just having a older lens paired up with a modern body really allows your camera to kind of create a differing image than others. So I kind of touched on the softness of this lens. I'm going to put up a picture here, and this is focused to infinity or almost infinity. And you can kind of see exactly what I'm talking about. Like I said, it's not the softest, and right here you can see just how soft it is towards the edges, and I think that that's kind of a drawback in my opinion. I think that lenses should hold sharpness throughout the entire thing, but I think that that's just one other thing. And also, when I was out shooting, I noticed that this lens and other vintage lenses kind of creates these really cool lens flares if you get it in the right light, and I'm really a huge fan of this. I think that it kind of adds just like one more quote-unquote artistic element to your image, and I think that if you can get the light right in a frame, then I think it's kind of cool and it would capture a viewer's attention. So kind of speaking about this lens in particular, I haven't had a chance to try out other lenses, but I can say that this is pretty low contrast. As you probably could guess, I shoot every video in S-Log, so I'm used to color grading low contrast footage, and I really think that this actually adds another level of latitude and kind of just allows you to play with your image a little bit more in post-production. However, I can say specifically for this lens that it rendered colors pretty great. I can say it had some problems with chromatic aberration, but again, that's just one more thing to add to your kind of arsenal of creating a differing looking image, which in my opinion isn't really that bad. There's plenty of ways to get rid of chromatic aberration, and I think that overall the colors look great out of this lens. I kind of mentioned this a little bit before, but I just wanted to really emphasize that the cost of entry for something like this is so much lower than you might expect an adapter. I think I spent like maybe $30 or $40 on just a basic adapter from MD to E-mount, and that has worked for me. The glass itself is a lot cheaper than modern glass. As you can imagine, modern glass can cost all the way from like $800 for a zoom lens all the way up to $2,500, and it even gets more expensive when you get into like the cinema realm. But I think that that's kind of a really cool thing about buying vintage glass is, yeah, you're not going to get the sharpest image, but if you're starting out and you don't know what, for example, a 85mm lens looks like, you can do that. You can get that lens so much cheaper than buying a brand new one that just got released 5 years ago. And I think it's really cool that you can kind of like build up your catalog of, well, these images look like this, so if I want to shoot this project, I would like this lens. And even if you choose to purchase a modern lens with that focal length, I think that it's really cool to have that in your catalog of, okay, well, this is what this focal length will look like, and this is what the effects will be to my subject. And then one other thing that I want to talk about kind of briefly on this, which is kind of the reason why I'm going to keep this in my camera bag, is that this lens and a lot of other still lenses have macro capability. I'm not a macro guy, but I do like it for a couple detail shots. If I'm shooting a wedding, just being able to get macro shots of like wedding rings, stuff like that, like that's really important. Like I said, I'm not a really huge fan of macro lenses. And I think that the use cases are way too small for me to justify a purchase of a modern macro lens. So I think that just keeping this in my camera bag would really serve me well for those very specific moments of, oh, okay, well, yeah, here's a situation where I might need a macro lens. So now I'm going to kind of talk about the drawbacks to buying vintage glass. There aren't that many, and some of them are kind of nitpicky, but I'm going to kind of go through a couple that I found. One thing that I'm going to bring up is the fact that these are vintage lenses. So when I say that, I mean that these lenses are old. They are very old, so problems can arise. I have a minor scratch in mine, and it's not visible if I don't stop down to f8 or so, but I never realized that just in my everyday shooting. But I think that's something to mention. I think that just because the lens is really old, you have a higher probability of getting defective products. So I think that that's definitely kind of a drawback, and you have to be really careful with what lenses you decide to purchase. Definitely give a good look at anything. I know it's really hard to tell on eBay, but do your best to try to figure out, okay, is this lens in good quality? Has it been stored properly, etc. So one thing that I'm going to bring up that's kind of weird about this lens, and it's not specific to this lens in particular, but a lot of vintage glass does this, especially zooms, well, only zooms, is that you have a focal range, and when it's fully like condensed like this is your furthest focal length. So in order to actually bring this out to 28 millimeters, you have to kind of extend it like so, which is just kind of counterintuitive. So if you're just picking it up and you're not used to the lens or anything, that would definitely throw you off. It definitely threw me off in a couple of situations, but I think that that's at least worth mentioning. So I feel like this is kind of an obvious one, but there's no autofocus on vintage glass. Just grow up and learn how to manually focus your lenses. So now I'm going to kind of talk about why I'm going to always keep a vintage lens in my bag. And I think it's this. I think this 28 to 75 is really the one that I'm going to stick with. And it's just about diversifying your shots. I think that modern glass is great, and it definitely achieves a certain look to it, and a lot of clients and a lot of people are very happy with it, and I think that that's deservingly so. But being able to diversify your deliverables to your client kind of just gives that extra push. It kind of shows them that you're thinking outside the box. It kind of shows them that you care, and just having a more diversified deliverable is always a benefit in my eyes. So that's kind of the reason why I'm going to keep this on. Would I keep it on my camera all the time? Probably not, to be honest, especially with a client shoot. But I think that it's at least worth keeping in my bag so I can swap to it. So I hope this video kind of helped. I hope it gave you a new perspective on why you might want to try out vintage glass. So if you have any questions at all, whether it's specific to this lens or just in general about vintage glass, just leave a comment down below. I absolutely love answering questions in my comments, so I look forward to hearing from you. And I hope this video helped. If it did, feel free to leave a like, maybe even consider subscribing. I have a couple of really cool projects coming up that I just genuinely cannot wait to share. So thanks, guys.